Hello, everybody. So, finally, the elections to 4 states and 1 union territory comes to an end. By the time the election results have come, India is already facing a huge COVID second wave crisis. But amidst all of that, these numbers do have very strong implications. To understand the results, we have with us Vasudha Venugopal, who is going to help us understand the Bengal numbers. Rekhi, who is going to help us understand Tamil Nadu results. And we have Bikash Singh from Assam, who is going to help us understand what it means for the state's politics and what implications it will have in the whole of Northeast politics. With all of that, first, my request to Vasudha Venugopal. Vasudha, how do you look at the numbers? Did people actually expect it? And what do you think is going to happen now in Bengal?
Well, the story of Bengal elections is just one person, Mamata Banerjee, and honestly, I did not expect this sweep. This election was a lot about the hype that the BJP had created about its own campaign. And, a lot of anger on the ground. I wouldn't call it anger now, it was disappointment with the government. But probably a lot of it was assuaged by Mamata Banerjee in a very clinical, systematic, emotional way. And she reached out to the voters in ways that were clearly better than anything that the BJP could do. She has registered a victory which is probably a historic one of sorts, because she's fought the left and now she fought the right forces. I think this story is about, the Bengal story is all about Mamata Banerjee, her gumption, her conviction, and her relentless fight to keep going. And, despite all her confrontations with the Election Commission, with the BJP, all the attacks on her, all of us saw how polarized the campaign had become towards the end of the month. It was a month-long campaign, right? It just went on and on and on. And all of us were getting tired and Mamata Banerjee was not getting tired. The BJP leaders, of course, had built a different way, so they just kept going. But I would give it to her because also I think TMC is probably one of the few parties that made a lot of course correction after 2019. Yes, a lot of us did not take that very seriously because we thought maybe the anger is too serious, but actually it was not. It was not anger. In fact, it was just basic anti-incumbency that she fought with her sincerity, with her power to convince people that she has done something for them and she'll be able to do more. That's what she kept telling in every rally, that, I have done some mistakes, my people have done some mistakes, so slap us, give us 2 slaps, but we will come back to you, we will work for you, don't vote against us. So, so this campaign was entirely about Mamata Banerjee and her courage to keep her party together.
Yeah, your opening comments about Tamil Nadu.
Tamil Nadu is also quite significant because the DMK coming to power is not something that was not expected. It was pretty much said in every opinion and exit poll that they would be coming to power, except I think what was interesting was that it wasn't the kind of sweep that was being projected, because they actually had a lot in their favor in terms of the anti-incumbency. The AIADMK has been in power for the last 10 years. So there was this whole anti-incumbency factor that they had in their favor. However, I think through the results and what we've seen is this anti-incumbency wasn't as big of a factor because the Palanisamy government is quite light. In fact, a lot of the analysts I spoke to also said, we have a feeling that the goodwill, as they called it, the goodwill of Palanisamy is being underestimated in these opinion and exit polls. And that was kind of what came with the results as well, because it seems like people didn't have a problem with the governance as such. What worked in the DMK's favor seems to be this whole alliance with the BJP that the AIADMK had, because Tamil Nadu as such is not very welcoming of the BJP in terms of this very strong anti-Hindi, anti-BJP sentiment, which the DMK really capitalized on. In fact, through this election campaign, that the DMK was actually very clear in telling voters, don't vote for the AIADMK because they are just a slave of the BJP. So they, in effect, had made the BJP as the target of the entire campaign. And I think that really worked in their favor, because even when I was speaking to a lot of people on the ground, I traveled to quite a few of the districts and constituencies. I did see that on the ground, people were very disillusioned with this AIADMK BJP alliance, because many of them, in fact, told me, Amma irunda idu aayirkaru, which basically means if Amma was there, this would never have happened. As in, the BJP and AIADMK wouldn't have been together. So very staunch, loyal AIADMK voters were thinking of voting for the DMK as like a complete opponent, or even the newer party players like you had Kamal Hassan and so on.
Bikash, did you actually expect Assam to see a second BJP government, or were you surprised to an extent?
No, it was not at all a surprise. You see, BJP was in election mode ever since October last year. There are three takeaways, broad spectrum in which this BJP has fought this election. One, that this is a clash of civilization. There is a need to protect the culture and civilization. And they branded Ajmal as someone who is alien to Assamese culture and civilization. Then they created lakhs of beneficiaries, 96 lakh. And BJP had a target of getting around 1 crore vote. Assam roughly has a population of 3.2 crore, something like that. Then the government managed COVID situation very well. And in a way, the Anti-Citizenship Amendment Act sentiment was nullified to a greater extent during COVID management. In COVID, what they did, the health minister was ever present in the night, in the day. The chief minister was touring districts after districts. What the whole impression the people got, that there is a government who is there. So, and BJP's own cadre base, they have really grown very well. And the RSS has made a huge inroad in the tea gardens. And the result is, out of the Upper Assam, the whole seat, Congress could just manage to get 5 seats, whereas BJP and his allies have taken away the whole. So, in a whole, BJP, this is a history. For the first time, a non-Congress government has been voted straight for the second time in Assam.
This, which Bikash talks about in Assam, which was not there for BJP in Bengal, in the sense that BJP in Bengal did not have a strong local face, one, and two, the fact that BJP somewhere was too much of hype, but not that much of deeper penetration, which probably has been there in Assam.
Bikash is completely right. In Bengal, what happened was very similar to what happened in Delhi. Every time there is a very strong CM face, BJP struggles to project one of its own as a counter to it. And you saw that happen in Bengal. There were too many local leaders, but there were also too many defectors. And, there was a complete khichdi of sorts. Yes, of course, these were strong faces in their own right. I mean, if you look at Shuvendu Adhikari, he has managed to make 10 people, 10 of his people win despite this being a wave election. So he is a strong face. But then he hasn't been able to manage the victories for other people. So, and none of these people, including Dilip Ghosh or Mukul Roy, could actually guarantee victory for the party in their own, bastions. And none of them could match the popularity of Mamata Banerjee. And she could speak to the voters in a language that they understood. It was very new to me because there was no strategy in it. Yes, of course, everybody talks about Prashant Kishore strategizing the election. He played a very critical role in this. But when Mamata Banerjee talks to people, she talks to them like, she's a neighbor, or she's a didi, or she's one of their aunts. So, and that is why this emotional thing with her is so strong. And that was completely missing in voters about any of the BJP leaders. This is a problem that the BJP has to address. It has to empower local leaders. I think the Prime Minister understood the gravity of this, because in a meeting with the BJP Bengal team, he told them very clearly that, why don't you have more local leaders, Bengali leaders on stage when you have Jan Sabhas? And all of that happened, but none of them could match the stature and personality of Mamata Banerjee.
What now for Mamata Banerjee? Could she emerge as the face of the united opposition?
Early to say, but she has good connections. She has a good relationship with all the opposition leaders. So, but then she also has her own issues, right? And she's a Bengali person. She's a Bengali leader. Everybody respects her a lot. But this is, yes, of course, this victory is an eye-opener for BJP. I don't think they've really had a setback of this sorts in a long, long time. Yes, of course, we can say that 2019 ke baad, they've not really won an election per se, but this was not something that any of them expected. So yes, she is a challenger in her own right, but she has a lot of things to do.
How do you look at the next DMK government to be? Do you think there would be a certain bit of hostility towards AIDMK also?
It's definitely a possibility, sir, because even traditionally you see that these two parties are always at loggerheads. So I do feel like this is something which could happen, but I think he has a tougher task at hand, because like Vasudha was mentioning, we have this huge COVID crisis right now, and even Tamil Nadu as such, we've seen over 20,000 cases yesterday with 153 deaths. So he has a huge, he has his work cut out for him now. Tamil Nadu, as we know, is a very large contributor to the national GDP as well. It also has a huge number of small and medium enterprises which are really, really ailing at this point. Apart from this, I think what's also important is that there's one aspect which is very distinct to Tamil Nadu politics, which is this whole freebie culture. And this time was no different, because both the AIADMK and the DMK had promised this slew of freebies and doles if they were brought to power. And the DMK had also said a number of things in terms of social welfare measures and so on. And this will all put stress on the entire economy. And there's also the fact that they've made quite a few promises, whether it is in terms of even prohibition in a phased manner of liquor. I think that is going to be interesting to see how they manage that, because in a state like Tamil Nadu, where a large proportion of your revenue comes in from liquor, a lot of analysts are also saying we don't know, and analysts and economists are saying we don't really know whether this is probable and how this is going to work out and pan out.
What happens now in Assam? Because Congress is more or less almost decimated.
Basically, if you see, Northeast India has been Congress bastion. And till December last year, Congress leadership in Assam was into deciding, they were into fighting that who will be the APCC president. Now, for Congress, the task is really difficult, because Congress per se in Upper Assam has managed just 5 seats, and Upper Assam has been a huge support base for Congress always, and unless and until they get back to the tea tribes, the Assamese, the main Assamese people, the tribes, it's very difficult for the Congress.
Last question to Vasudha. Vasudha, where does the left and Congress go from here in Bengal?
One thing about Bengal is voters vote very decisively. And this, I think, the collapse of the left and the Congress campaign also helped Mamata Banerjee a huge deal. Not able to find a section that has not voted for her. She has beaten the BJP in their identity game, which I'm sure Dia and Bikash would also agree that BJP is so strong in its identity games, getting all the little caste groups and all that. But Jhargram, which is like the epicenter of all tribals, PMC has swept all 4 seats.
Do you think EPS is a relieved man?
I'm not sure. I think he would be, sir, because he's really emerged as someone who can be, a force to reckon with, which is something which people didn't even consider too much during this election. They really thought it was going to be the AIADMK, it was going to be like some kind of washout, but it really wasn't. And he had a lot of things against him, because the AIADMK from the beginning was still weaker alliance because they only had the BJP and the PMK. And as we know, the BJP is not something which is considered to be an asset in Tamil Nadu at this point. Though, by the way, this time around, they've actually performed very well in comparison to what was expected of them. In fact, in Coimbatore South, where it was considered to be this urban phenomenon where Kamal Hassan would win, we've seen that the BJP's Vanati Srinivasan has won there.
And the second thing is, in these turbulent times, EPS probably is happy because he has all the time to consolidate his hold over the party.
And his whole handling of the COVID situation was lauded to quite an extent. So if Stalin is going to have a really tough time matching up to it or doing better also. So he is in a good place, I think, at this point, because on one hand, he is in, the opposition. He can be in that place, like you said, to hold them accountable, the DMK and its partners. And at the same time, he's also managed to prove himself to be quite a mass leader, because AIADMK has managed to retain power in the western belt in Tamil Nadu, which is an AIADMK stronghold, the Kongu region. They've managed to retain power there. And if I might add, this whole PTV Dinakaran factor that was being talked about extensively, AIADMK has managed to get quite a few seats. And at the same time, PTV Dinakaran has not received a single seat. So I think he's really managed to put himself in a good spot for himself.
With the Himanta Biswa Sarma kind of a person around, he probably is going to eat up into the Congress workers and the resource. So probably Congress should get its act together and start working towards creating a viable alternative in the state.
Definitely, because even prior to election, he brought a couple of Congress leaders, gave them ticket, and they won. Even now, they are still working on some Congress leaders whom they think they can bring on board. So Congress has really the task is really cut out for Congress. It has to work hard. One, it has to save its own leader. Secondly, it has to grow up its leaders. And the third task is that Congress organization, which is no match for BJP, they have to come up to that level, because BJP's the Panna Pramukh, the Pista Pramukh model has really worked in Assam, has really done wonders to them.
Thanks a lot for helping us understand what these elections mean and what tasks these states and of course the central government has at hand in addressing the big challenge of pandemic.